Hey guys, so today I wanted to do something that was suggested to me by a lovely person on Facebook that I hadn't thought about doing, but when she said it, it was an amazing idea, so here we are. I am going to be reviewing my many tarot and oracle decks because I have a large and rapidly growing collection, and I'm going to do them one at a time so that I can give each deck proper justice and really go through it and talk about it without making a video that's 5 hours long or longer, given the number of decks I have. But today I wanted to start with one of my personal favorites, and that is the Ostera Tarot. I can't remember where I first saw this deck, if it was on somebody else's video or if I just stumbled upon it somewhere on the internet, but I saw it and I was immediately intrigued. So I rushed over to Amazon and looked into it. And so when I saw it, I got that feeling, that chills up my spine. I need to have this thing feeling that I don't get super often. It happens sometimes with different tarot decks or crystals or whatever, but every now and then something just has a vibe that calls out to me. And when I got the deck and I started working with it, I realized that one of my ancestors actually uses this deck specifically to speak to me. And that was when I realized it was her that was like, you have to get this. So it comes in this box, which is actually a really nice quality box. As you can see, it's this lovely green color and has some beautiful artwork on it. And then it opens like that, and it has this ribbon to let it just kind of lean that way. It, of course, has a full color guidebook, and then the cards come more or less like this. I obviously opened it before, so that's why they're loose. So one of the first things that really grabbed me was the back of the cards are so beautiful. Like, out of the entire deck, this is my favorite artwork. I love it so much. So I'll be back in just a second after I get them out of the box so that I can show you the cards themselves. Okay, so now I have the whole deck out of the box, and I feel like this deck is really decent quality. One thing I do want to say is, as you can see, the edges of the cards are gilded with silver color, and when the deck came, it was actually completely stuck together with the silver, and I had to go through and individually separate each card, which took some time. It was honestly a little bit of a pain, and it did end up with some roughness on the edges in some spots because of that, and it did take some time to really get each card individually separated because they really were stuck together like in clumps. But once I got that taken care of, it's been no issue whatsoever with the cards sticking together. They have a glossy finish, which is my personal favorite, because I feel like they don't stick to each other. I've had some decks that have it almost feels like a silicone rubbery finish, and that's my least favorite because those decks I can't seem to get the cards to separate when I try to shuffle. But as you can see, it does have this gorgeous metallic silver edge, which was one of the things that drew me in for sure. So I want to actually go through the entire deck, which will take a minute, and they're not in order, and some of them are probably reversed, as you can see. That one was. But I want to go through and like show you every card so you know what to expect. But also, one of the things about this deck is it actually was created by 4 different artists, which it explains all about in the book. So you have Julia Iredale, Molly Applejohn, Eden Cook, and Krista Gibbard. And they each took a suit of the cards, and I'll tell you, like, as I'm going through the suits, which one is which. But then they all took some of the major arcana cards, so the major arcana is mixed between the 4 artists. And I think that's really cool. I think this is the only deck I have that was actually multiple artists that worked on it. So I think that's unique, and it's kind of cool to see how different the artwork of each artist is and how different their interpretations are as they created the artwork for the deck. Okay, so I'm going to try to separate things out into suits here, and I'll be back. Also, I apologize if traffic gets super loud. because my filming area is right in front of a window, which is like maybe 50 feet from a somewhat major road, and people are just out there gunning it and being way louder than usual, more motorcycles than usual, so there's probably going to be more traffic noise in this video than I would prefer, personally. Alright guys, so we're going to go through the major arcana first. Also, I'll just let you know in advance, I apparently lost the Hanged Man out of this deck. I don't know how. I checked the area I do my readings in and I can't find it anywhere because they do sometimes rocket onto the floor, but that card is nowhere to be found. So hopefully I find it eventually, because I don't like having a deck minus an important card like that, but for the time being, it is. So anyway, we're going to go in order. So first we have the Fool, and this is what she looks like. Kind of like a little witchy girl riding a broom with lots of birds around. And this deck has what I would consider more unique meanings. They're definitely related to the Rider-Waite standard meanings, but they are unique to this deck. And I'm not going to fully read through all of them. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what it looks like in the book. And the Fool is, of course, the beginning of the whole journey that the major arcana represents. So she's got an innocence, she or he, or they have an innocence, and they're kind of starting out in a place of absolute trust, but it also can represent the new beginning, like of a new place in your life, or even sometimes it can represent recklessness, or just, you know, charging wildly ahead and not worrying about consequences or things like that at this time. Just like go for it, take that chance. So that's what the Fool tends to represent. Next, we have the Magician, and I really like this version of the Magician. I like the art by this particular artist, and we'll get to that when we get to her whole suit of cards, but she tends to have this light coming from the eyes, and I just love that symbology. I think it's really gorgeous. So here's the Magician in the book. And the Magician refers to manifestation and coming into your power and learning what is magical about you. Also, even like experimentation and figuring things out. So that's always a good card to get too. Next, we have the High Priestess. And this is, of course, the cover art for the book in the box as well. And I think because of that, and also the light colored hair and the kind of braids, this is the one that the ancestor that reads through this deck uses to represent herself. Sometimes it represents other things, but depending on the reading that she's giving me, this will actually be her. And I really like this card because it has kind of a moth styling to it, which is pretty fun, and I'm a big fan of Luna moths, so, and also the colors. And then this is the page in the book for this card. And I always take the High Priestess to be very much a female mysteries, divine wisdom kind of card. Like a spiritual leader, obviously like a High Priestess would be, but also like a matriarch or someone who's deeply spiritual. So next we have the Empress. So you can see she's surrounded by a lot of plants, and this flower kind of has a glow to it, and she looks kind of serene, and it's a very abundant card and a very referring to nature type of card. Here's the page in the book, and it refers to fertility and femininity in general. Then we have the Emperor, and of all my decks, this is one of my favorite Emperor cards because I've often seen the Emperor portrayed as an older man who's in a clear position of power, which does work with the card, but it is refreshing to see kind of a youthful nature spirit, or even, I mean, he basically looks like Pan, or reminds me of Pan. So it's kind of cool to see a more free-spirited version of the Emperor. And the Emperor stands for a lot of things, which can include masculinity, as he's the counterpart to the Empress. But it also refers to like leadership and passion and self-trust. I feel often comes up with the Emperor card as well. Which is probably why I get the Emperor card a lot, because self-trust is definitely something that I've been working on and need to work on more. So next we have the Hierophant. And to be honest, this card kind of made me uncomfortable at first, and I think it's just the way it's depicted, which does happen for me sometimes with various tarot cards and stuff. I do like it, it's just, it took me a while to get used to it. And oddly enough, the Hierophant has always kind of been that card for me, that the meanings are all good and everything, but I don't know, there's an odd vibe to that card. The Hierophant and the Moon both those cards give me weird vibes in any deck that they're in. I especially struggle with the Moon in the deck that I myself designed, and I designed it that way for a reason, but seeing it creeps me out a little bit. So, and we'll get to that when I do a video on my own deck. So this card refers to like tradition and conformity, but it also refers to knowledge and belief systems and being like well-read, or again being like a spiritual leader, because this is in some decks the High Priest card, which would be the counterpart to the High Priestess, but in a lot of decks it's titled the Hierophant. And there's almost a mystery around this card, and I think that might be why I occasionally find it so unsettling. And that's even again in the deck that I designed, because the way I created the figure is kind of distant, and most of the ones in my deck are kind of faceless, but there's just this mystery about it, I guess would be the best way to explain it. But the Hierophant a lot of time comes up in regards to learning or gaining knowledge or learning something new. It can also refer to a mentor coming into your life. Next we have the Lover's card. And I like the way it's depicted in this deck, because it's almost like they're doing a tango. And I think it's kind of appropriate to what this card represents, because it's not just about like relationship love, it's about like decisions and choices and kind of the push and pull of life, and almost the dynamic between the divine feminine and the divine masculine, like not in a physical relationship kind of way, but like an internal way, because we all have divine feminine and divine masculine. So this card kind of refers to the dance and ebb and flow and shift of those two dynamics within us. So next we have the Chariot, and the artwork for this one is really cool. I love that it's all kind of, oh my goodness. I love that it's all kind of monochromatic, which is just a favorite thing of mine. I love monochromatic art just as much as I love extremely colorful art. I like the reference to chess here as well, with the two knights. The Chariot most obviously can refer to travel or movement, even like the progression of a project or something, but it also can refer to confidence, mastery of something, following your heart, and it also refers to like in the sense of movement, like studying or learning, or like that slow progress towards a goal. At times it can refer to both the tortoise and the hare in different ways, but kind of that concept of the speed at which you're moving towards something. So then we have Justice. This is one of my favorite cards, and the artist that created this created several of my favorite cards. So what it's depicting is actually an ancient Egyptian concept where a person's heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, and that is to see how just the person was, how kind they were, how they lived their life, and if the heart is lighter than the feather of Ma'at, then you would go to the equivalent of heaven. But I love the artwork for this. I think it's really pretty how it was depicted. So then for the page, this card obviously refers to justice in general, which kind of is always about truth and balance and order. It's a very Libra vibe. It can refer to legal matters, lawfulness, following the rules. It can refer to needing to take a step back and look at things from a more objective point of view. When we're getting overly emotional, this card can remind us to calm that down and bring logic back into the equation. So then we have the Hermit. And this one, I'm honestly not crazy about, just as far as depictions of the Hermit, not one of my favorites. And I think part of it might be because the figure is a child, but also I think it's just, I don't know, actually. It's kind of dark and creepy, and that's not how I see the Hermit. So I guess that's why. But the Hermit card, which is one of the cards that tends to come up in my readings a lot. And I think that's for two reasons. One is I kind of am the Hermit in a lot of ways, but also because I may negatively shut myself away too much, so it can come up like in reverse for me if I'm doing that, where I'm blocking myself off from people a little too much. But the card itself refers to like introspection and looking into yourself and contemplating and understanding yourself and meditating and like really putting the time into your inner world to understand who you are and what you do better, and like kind of taking that time away from people, away from distractions, away from like the internet and social media and even work sometimes, to take that time to look into yourself, to take that break from the rest of the world. So next we have the Wheel of Fortune. And that's a pretty cool card. It has this optical illusion effect to it that kind of makes my eyes feel a little buggy, but other than that, I really like it. And the Wheel of Fortune is an interesting card because it refers almost to the shift back and forth between things going on in our lives, the stages of our lives, the ups and downs of life very specifically. So like on one hand, it could refer to amazing things are coming in, and on the other hand it can refer to things being on a downswing, or you kind of heading towards even like a rock bottom situation. And it can even say like, okay, you're here and things haven't been great, but it's going to turn. It's really a reminder that things never stay the same. Change is a constant, so no matter where you are, there's going to be a change. And when this card comes up, it's usually saying, hey, that change is right around the corner for you. So next we have Strength, and I thought it was really interesting that this has cities on each of her shoulders, but then she's got her heart that she's holding in front of her instead of inside of her body, and then she also has her dragon buddy here, which replaces the traditional lion that you see in the Strength card in most tarot decks. And the Strength card refers to just that. It can refer to physical strength, but a lot of times it actually refers to inner strength, strength of character, your ability to withstand, and your willpower, and just all the qualities it takes to really hold your own in the world. And a lot of times this card will come up to remind you that despite the challenges you're facing, you can get through it because you are this strong. So the next one is the Hanged Man, which is the card I don't currently have. And I know I used to. Like, I definitely had the card. It came up in readings before, and now it's gone. It's so weird. But that's what the card looks like, because the book has these gorgeous full color, exactly like the card itself. Like, it's identical. It's just slightly different size. But the Hanged Man represents a period where things kind of flip on their head. In the journey of the major arcana, it's where the subject of the journey, who starts as the fool, becomes the magician and meets all these different characters and has these experiences. It's where that character has reached a point where they're realizing the world doesn't make sense as it is, that maybe even they themselves don't make sense, and it's kind of the awakening of this person. The Hanged Man strongly to me represents self-reflection, and it's self-reflection different to the Hermit, where the Hermit's kind of doing it to learn. The Hanged Man is actually doing it to dispel illusions, and it's typically illusions that we have about ourselves or that we have about the world. So it's illusions we kind of put on ourselves or that were put on us through life. So when the Hanged Man comes up, a lot of times it's showing that we're in a period of transition, we're in a period of really shifting our perspective, and we're also maybe recognizing some of our limiting beliefs or releasing our fears, or just kind of deliberately shifting and reflecting on how we interact with the world. So next we have the Death card, and I'll admit I had to look at this one a good bit before I figured out what was going on. It helps that the book actually describes it. So it's a vulture who is a skeleton, and they're in branches, and then there's vines sprouting out of their eyes. I'm not entirely sure what the disembodied hands represent, but there you have it. That's the Death card. And this is a card that when it comes up, people tend to, if they're not familiar with it, be like, oh no. And it's the one that you always see come out on TV as like the harbinger of terrible things to come or literal death. And it's not at all what it is. I mean, if anything, the Tower is more that card, and that isn't even the case, really. What the Death card actually represents is change, endings, transformation, and new beginnings, which is essentially what death is, because we move from this world to the next, and likely into a new life. So that's literally what the Death card says, is something that has been in your life, or a part of your life, or is a part of you, is ending, dying, or going away, and that's making way for something new and fresh and exciting to come in. And it can refer, and typically refers, to a very personal transformation. Whatever it is that's happening is going to help you to remold yourself and remake yourself into something different, something new. So I actually get excited when I get the Death card. Okay, so next we have the Temperance card, and I really love the imagery of this card because I like the flow of it. And that's what Temperance to me is really about, is flow. And it refers to balance and kind of the same elements as Justice, but in a different way. Because this almost is, like, the Justice card is very objective and not emotional, whereas this is like that, but for the emotional side of us. So like Temperance and Justice are kind of the same concept, but one is logical mind, one is heart. At least that's the way I see it. And Temperance very much to me is finding that, like, that peace of mind, that comforted place, that cool waters inside of us. Also, Temperance, I feel, is very often one of the most beautiful cards in the deck, likely because of what it represents. Okay, so next we have the Devil. And the way it's depicted in this deck, I think, is really interesting because there's all these cages with different creatures and people. And it kind of shows how this card refers to being in bondage, because that's at the core of the Devil card. That's what it's about. It almost refers to the concept that people in hell would be bound by their own, like, addictions or desires, their unhealthy attachments, essentially, and that is the thing that would keep them there, that would bind them, that would cause them to suffer, is like the things that they themselves are clinging to and don't want to let go of. So that's kind of what the Devil card to me talks about. Anything that we are holding on to the point that it's harming us. Anything that we are refusing to see about ourselves. Anything that we are just allowing ourselves to fall into to the extent that it takes us away from, like, our highest good or our purpose. But it's not like a literal being keeping you down, except for yourself, in a way. And then we have the Tower, which seems like it's one of the most dreaded cards of the deck. That and some of the swords. But here's their imagery for it. It's kind of it's like the Tower of Babel crashing down, I think, is what the imagery was going for. That might just be my assumption, but you can also see looming in the background is the moon, which is not many cards away. But that, to me, at least in this deck, really illustrates how illusions kind of come into play with the Tower crumbling, because the moon card is about illusions, but also the Tower can refer to an external situation that is very calamitous, putting you through your paces, really causing you to have to endure rather than exist more peacefully. But in a lot of cases, what we think the calamity is, what we think this extremely difficult moment is, or that it would become, is actually something internal. It's how we're seeing the situation rather than how the situation actually is. So the Tower can kind of cut both ways. It can be both, there are events outside of you that are causing you this strife and difficulty and transformation, or it can also be like, especially in reverse, like you're seeing this that's not as bad as it seems. But the Tower also, especially with like the fire element, is kind of a phoenix moment in a way. What is crashing down with the Tower is things that shouldn't be in our lives in the first place, things that are being burned away so that we can have a better life. Tell me I didn't okay. I got out of order, don't mind me. So next we have the Star. And this is kind of like my card. It's my favorite card in like every deck I ever touch. Part of that is just I like stars. The artwork for this card is usually my favorite in the deck. Not always. It's not in this deck in particular, but in many decks it is. And it's the card of Aquarius. And I'm an Aquarius. So, you know, I do like the artwork. I'm not saying I don't. It's just not my favorite in the whole deck. But anyway, what the star refers to, it can quite literally be like your star in the colloquial way that we understand that as, like, you know, a pop star or something, or a movie star or whatever. But it's also a card of like hope and self-esteem and believing in yourself, regardless of your outward circumstances, seeing yourself as a star. And I think that's one of the reasons also that I like this card so much, is it's really a card of like pumping you up. When this card comes out, the universe or your guides or your subconscious or whoever you think drives your tarot experience, and for me it's different depending on the deck. This is my ancestor Annalika who speaks through this one. But the star coming out is like she's saying, hey, don't forget how amazing you are, because you are. The moon. And I really like the moon in this deck. It's not one of the decks where the moon kind of creeps me out a little bit. It does kind of have these dark figures and these reaching hands back here, which is a little weird. I'm not entirely sure what this thing on the end of the staff is. I was kind of wondering about that, but didn't find any hints in the description of the card. But I think this card is gorgeous. I love the artwork for it. I love that there's a little bit of a rainbow halo around the moon too, even though most of the card is like monochromatic. So the moon speaks about illusions and the subconscious and the things that we believe about ourselves that aren't necessarily true, especially in my case, or in my experience rather, things we believe about ourselves that are negative that aren't true, like that you can't do something, or that you can't accomplish something, or that you're not good enough. Like, I feel like the moon comes out to be like, yo, re-examine that, think about that, that's not true. It can also refer to just communicating with our subconscious, especially because nighttime is when we dream, and that's when our subconscious is speaking. Depending on the reading, the other context in which the card comes out, it could be speaking to that. It can also speak to just like feeling lost and uncertain. And when you read the tarot, it's very much about context. So like, I usually have to like start looking at the cards before I understand what each individual one is saying. And sometimes I'll look at all the cards laid out and be like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Because just like as a group, I get a message. And then other times I'm like super confused and I don't understand what the cards are saying at all. And I'm pulling clarifying cards like from the same deck or another deck to try to understand what was intended in the first place. So next we have the sun. I love it when artwork has a glow to it. It's something I try to incorporate in my own pieces. So I always get excited when I see artwork that way. That's part of why I like this card so much too. So the sun is a great card to have come out in a reading because it's like all the things. It's the sun itself, like the actual sun in the sky. It represents life itself. It represents being able to grow food, to have warmth, to be alive, because without the sun we wouldn't be here. And without being the perfect distance from the sun, we wouldn't be here. So this card really speaks to all those good things that make life possible and fun and amazing. So this card tends to speak to victory and success and good luck and just great things like that. So next we have Judgment, and you have this kind of archangel looking figure standing over people who look kind of serene, kind of upset. And again, we have a nice glow back there. And what the Judgment card refers to, it's kind of bringing up the religious idea like the Justice card did, of almost an end of life kind of judgment. Like, okay, so here's how you lived your life and what comes of it. So Judgment can speak to consequences, both positive and negative. It's not strictly like, okay, you're going to get punished now. It can be, you're going to get rewarded. It can also refer to like a change in life phase in a similar yet different way from the death, because judgment obviously would come after death, because you die and then you're judged. At least in religious traditions, we actually judge ourselves constantly throughout our lives, as do other people. It's almost like a card to take time and review and make judgment for yourself. You want to get kind of a clear vision of the things that have happened so that you can understand how to move forward and learn from what has happened in the past. So it's both clearly seeing and like discerning whether things that happened were negative or positive, or whether it matters if they were negative or positive, but also how to move forward from them in a positive or beneficial way, or for your higher good. And the last card of the major arcana is the World. And as you can see, it has not only the earth itself, but also 4 zodiac signs. It has Aquarius, Scorpio, Taurus, and Leo. And I like the art of this card because it's got a peaceful vibe to it. So the World being the last card in the Major Arcana, it represents kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. Okay, now that the car alarm stopped. Anyway, so what was I saying? The World represents the opposite position of the Fool. So where the Fool is at the beginning of the journey, full of innocence and naive, the World finds our hero of the journey having come full circle, that they're now wise and experienced and no longer innocent because they've seen negative things that kind of grew them up. So it can be a very positive card to get, but also if it comes up in reverse, that can actually be saying like you're so close to the finish line but something's holding you back. You're struggling to fully get there and finish what it is that you were trying to do. So if this card comes up in that regard, that could be, you know, just like take a step back, try to figure out what it is that's holding you back, because a lot of times it honestly can be our own self-doubt, or it can be something that you have no control over and that you have to find a way around. So the World can help to bring that into focus for you. So that is it for the Major Arcana. So next we'll do the individual suits, and we're going to go through those a little bit faster. Okay, so let's talk about the Suit of Wands. And this suit was drawn, or the artwork was created by Julia Iredale, and the book itself, it talks a little bit about her and links to her website. If you want more information, you can pause here and zoom in on that. And I love the art of this suit. I really like the way that she illustrates everything. It's got a really neat ethereal way about it, while also being almost like the outlined kind of artwork I really love, like comic books and cartoons and stuff has. So first we have Ace of Wands, and I often see this card very specifically as like creative related, and it can speak to like inspiration and creativity, but it can just speak to like that starting passion and energy and motivation for a project. Then for the Two of Wands, I love, this is one of the cards in particular where I love the kind of light coming from the eyes, because I very much see this card as seeing through the fog in a way, like almost like a clairvoyance. You see things that normally people wouldn't see, or something along those lines. But it also speaks to like, you know, planning for the future and making progress. But I also see it as like kind of seeing your way out of a cage, working your way towards a better future, or getting yourself out of a difficult situation. So then we have Three of Wands with this adorable little frog and his little boats. And threes tend to refer to shifts or movement or change or a new cycle. And this card kind of speaks to seeing that coming and preparing for it and making the moves you need to make now, so that when things are actually happening, you're ready to take whatever choice it is that you decide to make. So it's kind of like planning and preparation and getting your ducks in a row. And all these descriptions are really brief, and there are much more extensive ones out there for just kind of like general, either a deck that doesn't have a book like my own, or just if I feel like whatever's in the book isn't giving me enough information. I usually use a website called Biddy Tarot. That's BIDDY. I'll link it in the description, but that's where I usually go for lengthier descriptions of both the upright and reversed positions of the cards. It's a great website with really in-depth information. So the Four of Wands is a card of celebration, even like coming home or being part of a community, being celebrated in your community. It can also refer to like harmony and contentment and things being more peaceful and happy. In contrast, the Five of Wands, which I love this card. It's so cool looking. I really like snakes. They're one of my favorite critters. I tried to combine the two. What this card represents is conflict and disagreement and tension and competition between people, even within yourself. So this can be where you're really conflicted about something. This card might come out to kind of point that out and be like, hey, it's okay. Just weigh your options and figure it out. So then we have the Six of Wands, which is a really lovely card again. I love the fish theme. And this is a really positive card. It speaks about recognition for the things that you've accomplished. And that can be like public recognition. It can be you recognizing in yourself. yourself. And it can also speak to like victory and self-confidence and things that you set in motion really going right for you. Then we have the Seven of Wands, and the artwork for this card is really cool too. But you can see there's like all these different paths to get to that top part. So this card kind of speaks to a form of success that comes from finding your way, making your own path, overcoming challenges. It can also speak just to challenges, but it also refers to like persevering. And you can see the little character up here is down here kind of hanging off of that edge. It speaks to like what she had to go through to get there. Next we have the Eight of Wands, and this speaks to rapid change. And we have this gorgeous little hawk or eagle. I'm not sure which he is. But yeah, so the Eight of Wands speaks to a doubling of the Four of Wands. So it's a very positive card. It suggests that things that you've put in motion are changing rapidly. You're moving forward. You're getting like manifestations coming in, stuff like that. So this is one of my favorite cards in the whole deck. This is one of the cards that made me buy this deck. That and the art on the back. And I thought the box was cool. This card, the Knight of Wands, refers to courage and a test of faith, being brave, pushing through, making things happen despite the challenges. The Ten of Wands speaks to hard work that brought about achievement. It can also be saying that you're still carrying a burden that you need to let go of. The Page of Wands, I really like this card too. Fox is adorable. Pages tend to refer to starting off on a new chapter or journey. Wands is fire element, so it tends to refer to like enthusiasm and passion and excitement. So this kind of speaks to being like a free spirit and going off on a journey, and even referring to a new creative project or new beginning in general. Then we have the Knight of Wands. This is actually a bear. I thought it was a boar, but in the book it says it's a bear. This refers to setting things into motion related to the passion and energy that the page has. So this is where you're actually like making progress, making things happen, you're getting the work done. It can also speak of impulsivity and almost be a warning. You might be putting the cart before the horse. Queen of Wands. I swear the whole time I've had this deck, I think this card has only come out like twice. This represents femininity in the way of not backing down from a challenge, and you can see the artwork kind of echoes what we normally see on the Strength card with the woman and her lion companion. Wands are fire energy, so this is kind of a fiery queen who she just doesn't back down. She's a strong leader and she's really independent as well. And there's a lot of warm like solar plexus, sacral chakra energy here too. And then we have the King of Wands. I love how his antlers are glowing. I find this card so peaceful, even though it's a fire card. So it's interesting to me how this card brings together that sense of peace, even while it's fire. It's almost like the fire is so refined and contained and mastered. It speaks to like mastery of fire. The King of Wands specifically refers to like entrepreneurs or natural born leaders, even spiritual leaders. It could refer to somebody who's like a CEO or a boss. It can warn about like not to let yourself be too arrogant about it, if that makes sense. So that was the Suit of Wands. Oh my goodness. I found the Hanged Man while I was sorting through these cards. Here, I thought I lost it. No, when I was shuffling this out, or when I was sorting out my cards, I put it in the wrong spot. Go figure. Okay, so next we're going to do the Suit of Coins. And in some decks, this is the Suit of Pentacles. But same energy, just different ways of describing it. And this was illustrated by Molly Applejohn. And again, there's her information if you want to look into her more. So what I find interesting in hers is you can see how different the artwork is. There's a softness to the way that she illustrates, or almost like it's more loose and freeform, almost sketchy in a way. I think it's really interesting, like, you know, when you compare the two, how different they are, and yet all four of these different art styles in the same deck works really well. I think this is the sweetest, most beautiful little card ever. Look how cute that little mouse is. I love him so much. And then it's got little pansies, and I forget the name of these flowers, but they kind of look like bleeding hearts, but not quite, like almost like they're seen from a weird angle. So they might be bleeding hearts. And then he's got his little tiny coin, almost like he's handing a little gift. And this is, of course, the One of Coins, or the Ace of Coins. And the Suit of Coins in general, or Pentacles, tends to refer to various forms of prosperity and abundance. It can be material wealth, it can be spiritual wealth, it can be anything in between. So this one in specifics does tend to refer to actual prosperity. Being an ace, it speaks of something coming, and This one is like a change for the better or incoming prosperity. So it's a good new beginning kind of vibe that has some type of abundance coming your way. So the Two of Coins speaks to balance and decisions and trying to keep things kind of in order. And specifically, the card refers to you needing to act to make things stay balanced. It's not necessarily saying things are in balance, but that there are challenges you're facing to keep things in balance and that there's some effort on your part. In reverse, it can say like things are about to get really chaotic. So the Three of Coins, again, I love the colors in this, and the artwork is really cool. It kind of has this like gothic arch and then stained glass. And then there's this tiny little froggy on her shoulder whispering his knowledge into her ear. In the upright position, this card refers to like a teacher or mentor or learning or gaining knowledge. But what's interesting about this card is when it's in reverse, it refers to secrets being kept from you. So just the upright versus reverse of this card for some reason fascinates me to no end. So next we have the Four of Coins. And we have this cute little greedy bunny who is taking the wealth that he's acquired and then leaving his family or his community with it. So it's somebody who's benefited from a community and then takes what they got and runs off instead of putting that back into the community or like helping the community. So in that, this card tends to refer to greed. It can also refer to generosity in kind of like a backwards way, like someone who's being generous and maybe not seeing, basically getting used for it. Especially in reverse, it speaks to being taken advantage of, but also it can refer to shallow ideas of what makes a good life. Next we have the Five of Coins. In this deck in particular, again, it can refer to receiving generosity, but I find that it a lot of times refers more to not seeing or accepting the generosity that's offered to you and being kind of too prideful to accept help. Then we have Seven of Coins, and this, you can see she's got a scale, much like Libra and the Justice card. So this card again refers to balance, and this is usually balance in your favor. So this is suggesting that you maybe have a balanced approach to being generous and gratitude. It can also say that the generosity you've put out there, you are going to get reciprocation for. And then in reverse, it's saying that you've been generous and you're not getting that back. This again is such a cute card. So sweet. I love the family vibe here. And that's how I tend to read this card, is this really sweet little family unit snuggled up in their den with happiness and like the abundance that they need coming to them without a huge amount of effort. So it's just this nice little family unit kind of thing. But it speaks to comfort and being happy with what you have, and that you appreciate the little things in life, essentially. So then we have the Eight of Coins. This is the card essentially of hard work, and it speaks to putting in the effort and getting the rewards. It can be saying that you have put in the effort and now the rewards are coming. It can also be saying, hey, this is a time to really buckle down, put your nose to the grindstone, I think it is, and get the work done. But it also speaks to finding pleasure in hard work, like find a way to make it enjoyable, almost like the Seven Dwarfs whistle while you work kind of thing. So then we have the Nine of Coins. It's basically about like, hey, you've done the work, you've gotten these rewards, sit back and enjoy it. I get this card sometimes, and that's definitely what it's saying. Calm down, enjoy what you got, you're protected, you're in a good space, like enjoy it. Then we have the Ten of Coins. And this card almost always seems to reference a matriarchal or patriarchal situation. So like you've built a community, you've built a family, you've brought in this prosperity and wealth to have everybody be like well situated and abundant. And it's just kind of that like, okay, now you're retired and you're enjoying this life and you're spending time with your family and just enjoying the abundance that you built up. But yeah, generally Ten of Coins is seen as a really positive card. Next we have the Page of Coins. It's kind of hard to tell, but there's all these little foxes around her, and this giant coin in the background is also meant to be the moon. This is one of the cards that really speaks to spiritual abundance, because it's about really feeling into your intuition. It's about finding a sense of spiritual contentment. It can also speak to like meditation and reflection, and maybe even starting like a new spiritual practice that's going to be really rewarding for you. Then we have the Knight of Coins, and this speaks to being on kind of a difficult quest, almost like in a role-playing game. You're climbing the mountain, you're trudging forward, you are in the process. But it also speaks to you having the determination to do so, the will to keep on going. We have the Queen of Coins. I always take this as an extremely maternal card. And this kind of is almost Empress imagery, the way it's depicted here with the plants and stuff around her. But it's a very peaceful card. It speaks to like nourishing relationships or feeling safe, feeling protected. And it can also come out specifically to refer to a maternal figure in your life, whether it's your mother, yourself if you are a mother, etc. Finally, we have the King of Coins, and you can tell the artwork is a little dark the way it's depicted. It's almost creepy. He has these antlers loaded with riches, like just covered with gold and jewels. And yet the look he has about him is almost like he's eternally seeking more, like he's not satisfied. Like there's almost, that greed look about him. But there's also like that sense of pride. This card is not necessarily positive because it kind of walks that line between seeking, abundance and prosperity and hoarding it or endlessly wanting more. And that's one of the things I think almost about his face. Like he kind of almost seems lost in his pursuit of greed or pursuit of material wealth or whatever. And then when this card is reversed, the lust for greed has come to the point where like somebody's actually hurting other people. So I find like sometimes when this card comes up in a reading, it can be referring to a specific person, but it can also be just like a time to self-examine and consider if this is like you're maybe even being too brutal to yourself, like working yourself too much in the pursuit of abundance or money that maybe you don't even need as much as you think you do. Or maybe there's, a better way to go about it where you're not hurting yourself or others. So that was the suit of coins. So next up we have the suit of cups. Which was illustrated by Eden Cook. And so the Ace of Cups. This card's interesting. In fact, this subject comes up a couple of times in this suit. Cups represents emotion, but when I see a card like this, I specifically think of alcohol. And so it can be like fun, joyous companionship, partying with your friends, just happy vibes. But and especially in reverse, I feel like it can also refer to maybe even alcoholism. So I do tend to read this card this way, is like seeing alcohol is very much in the mix here. But it can also speak a lot to like relationships and stuff like that too, like maybe the start of a new one. So that's another way to read this card when it comes up. And in reverse, it can mean then like isolation. Next, we have the Two of Cups. This is another really sweet little illustration. Two adorable little birds nestled together. So this obviously speaks to kind of like romantic relationships or even just a really nice friendship or partnership. It's got just warm, happy, content feelings to it. In reverse, it can mean like maybe you're not really listening to your own feelings, or there can even be a breakdown in communication in a relationship. Three of Cups, and it took me a while to understand that there's 1, 2, 3 ladies on this card, because this one's mostly only reflected in the liquid. But I kind of dig how they're in water, and it almost feels like a sauna, or not a sauna, like a hot tub or hot springs or something like that. But this card speaks to both celebration, but also like spending time with friends or having a new friend group or a better friend group or a growing friend group kind of situation. It can suggest that new friends are coming into your life, or that it could be saying, hey, go spend time with friends. Maybe it'll help you with, how you're feeling about things. So the Four of Cups is all about having focus on options that aren't good for you, while better options are being offered to you and you're kind of ignoring it. So it's almost you're seeking quantity over quality, or it can be about wanting the wrong things for yourself. It can be about turning your nose up at something that's actually really good for you, or a good opportunity, or maybe a person who's good for you. In reverse, it can actually say like good news is coming your way, so that's always a good thing too. Then we have the Five of Cups, and this one I very much see as like the alcoholism card, at least for me. That's how I read it. And it does speak to disappointment and struggling to cope with emotions, struggling to feel okay, since Cups is the suit of emotion, and 5 tends to be a number that deals with things being at odds or in conflict. Then the Six of Cups, almost always this card is illustrated with children on it, because this card refers to childhood, and usually in a positive, nostalgic kind of way, at least upright. It also refers to your inner child specifically. It can refer to childhood memories, or it can refer to children in your life. It also refers to innocence, having fun, and just kind of going back to that way that we are when we're children. And in reverse, it can refer to like painful memories or childhood trauma. So then we have the Seven of Cups. And I read this particular card a couple of different ways, because one of the first things I really noticed about it is she looks like she's turning her nose up at people. She seems like she's almost about to just spill those cups everywhere. It makes me think of somebody who's just like reckless and self-centered and just going through the world kind of ignoring everybody else, doing their own thing. But another way to read this card, and I kind of just go intuitively with what else comes out around it, because you see she's human with an animal mask, and these are all animals with human masks. So I even sometimes see this card like the kind of masking that people do to fit in. So like that autistic people do, or even people who are like trans or whatever, when they're trying to be who everybody wants them to be, that isn't consistent with who they are. But I find it interesting that this card depicts that in two directions. So like she's masking to try to be like them, while they're masking to try to be like her, and kind of like nobody actually knows what's really going on. So in that way, this card really speaks to like illusions and people not being on the same page. Whereas if everybody was kind of like communicating how they really felt or being authentic, you would lose a lot of this confusion. Then we have the Eight of Cups, which I see instantly as like meditation, going to the top of a mountain and sitting and contemplating. And in the book, it does speak to this card being about disappointment and self-reflection. So it's almost like you've been through something and you've learned something, and now you're contemplating that. So it's kind of both. And then in reverse, it's saying that the thing that's on your mind is something that you just don't have enough information on yet. So there's not a whole lot you can do other than to just kind of throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, or just think about it, or just kind of like sit with it until something changes. Then we have the Nine of Cups, which is a gorgeous scene because I love cats, and look at those giant cats. Aren't they cute? Oh my gosh. I want giant cats that I can lay on and have a nap. But anyway, so this is about resting after accomplishing something. It's about indulging in a little self-care after you've put all this effort into something. So take the time for yourself when this card comes up. Also be proud of your accomplishments. Then we have the Ten of Cups, which I've seen described very differently in different decks. But in this deck, first of all, I love the glowing jellyfish. We have the lovers repeated, but this time they're blindfolded for real, because in the actual lovers card, it was kind of like they could see through the blindfold. You could still see their eyes. It was almost like they were blinded by passion but could still see. And here we have just total blindness. They're also being held by this octopus creature. And in this is intended to be a statue. The Ten of Cups usually is shown with like a rainbow, and it's a card of like ultimate happiness and fulfillment. And this card is beautiful and peaceful, but I feel like there's almost a darkness to the way this card is illustrated. So when the Ten of Cups comes up in this deck, I don't take it as just that ultimate happiness and fulfillment that you get from other decks. I feel like there's almost like a shadow over this one. Like things might look really amazing right now, but it might not always be that way. But that's just my interpretation. Then the Page of Cups. This is another one that I feel like could be taken both ways, and I have taken it both ways depending on the context. Because it's cool because you have this person, the Page of Cups, putting on a puppet show for a bunch of foxes, and it's all like dreamy and childlike and kind of cute and fun. But at the same time, this is an illusion that's being created. So I sometimes read this card as involving illusions, and not necessarily negative illusions, because like technically television is an entertaining illusion. It's not real. We know it's not real, but it's also not necessarily harmful in and of itself, but could be. So that's kind of how I read this card, is like it can refer to illusions that can become harmful, but it can also just be like childlike fun. Like I said, with the others, I read it based on the context around it. And of course on like who I'm reading for and what they've asked, or if they asked for anything. So next we have the Knight of Cups. I think this card is pretty cool because it's like a flying boat through the sky, and this person's like a fisher, and then we have a constellation up here. So the Knight of Cups is all about motivation and inspiration, and it can also speak to like dreams and sleep and even goals, like achieving your goals, making your way towards them. And it can also be saying to like really pay attention to what your subconscious is saying, because the cups, okay. The cups are all about emotion, and that can involve deeply subconscious things. So this is almost like a dreamy card in a way. Sometimes I read it as you need to try to understand, remember, or communicate through your dreams. So then we have the Queen of Cups. This card's really interesting to me when it comes up, because the Queen of Cups in general is about like intuition and empathy and like kind feelings and sweetness and really strong divine feminine energy. But in this card, and this is especially when reversed, but just in general, I can get the distinct vibe of drowning. And this is another when it comes up in the context. But it does sometimes come through that way, even though she is meant to be swimming towards the surface. Sometimes it seems like she's kind of held there and like reaching for the surface that she'll never get to. That's sometimes come up with like past life readings, where if I get this card, it usually comes with the message that that life drowned, or whether it was literally physically drowned, or if it was like they were drowning in work or something. It all depends on how the cards come out. And last but not least, we have the King of Cups, which I find this image to look like very ritualistic. So the King of Cups is about like reaching emotional maturity or mastery. It's a very wise vibe. So this can refer to like a mentor, a teacher, a person who's a leader who has reached a state of deep wisdom. It can also refer to you gaining emotional maturity, like recognizing that you've come a long way and, you know, you've become this being that's really strong and centered. But it also can just be like about balancing emotion and logic too into a really nice cohesive whole. And that was the Suit of Cups. I really thought this was going to be a quicker, easier video than it's turned out to be, which is not a bad thing by any means. I thought I was going to do several of these at once, and I clearly am not. Anyway, so on to the Suit of Swords. And this final suit was illustrated by Krista Gibbard, who also did the artwork for the back of the deck that I love so much. Like, this is seriously what sold me on this whole thing. That and my ancestors saying, buy it. Seriously, buy it. So this is the Ace of Swords, which is simultaneously desolate and adorable, because we have our little mouse with his tiny little crown, who's defeated this enemy despite the enemy clearly being much larger than himself, with a sword that he obviously could not wield physically. But this card speaks to mental clarity and truth and justice. I take this card, particularly in this deck, because of the mouse and the size of its enemy, as defeating something so much bigger than yourself that it didn't make sense, but also doing so in a way that was ethereal or metaphysical, because like the size of this mouse, it couldn't defeat an enemy that size, it couldn't wield a sword of that size, and yet here we are. So it really speaks to me of moving metaphysical mountains in your life and a huge ability to do so, or accomplishment of having done so. Then we have the Two of Swords, which I always see as like things being stuck in like a crossroads. In this case, you have a blindfolded blue jay who's built a nest on two crossed swords, and you have a crescent moon in the background, but it's kind of the like almost upside down version of how we normally think of a crescent moon or normally illustrate it, because we usually do it right side up or like this, where it's just perfectly sideways. So this card stands for stalemate, but I find it reads a lot of times as just indecision, of being kind of blind to all your options, or really being lost in your own head and unable to figure out which way you want to go. Then we have the Three of Swords, and I love how this is illustrated, and this card always reads to me as just heartbreak or being betrayed. So it almost always comes up as like, you know, somebody suffered a really difficult emotional time and are still healing from it, or when it's in reverse, it's just that you're on the mend, that you are getting better, that you are healing from it. So when it comes up in reverse, I take that as acknowledgement of that. So for one, I get this card all the time, which I'm pretty sure is my guide saying, rest, 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 rest. Why aren't you resting? But also, so cute little bunny guy here. I love him so much. The swords are actually like I didn't even notice this at first, but they're so detailed. It's very cool. And there's even like this whole map in the background, which I didn't even notice at first. Like it took me, like this card came out so many times before I noticed that map. So this is a card of like rest, obviously, because I said it 5 times, but also like contemplation, taking time to yourself, recovering from something. So if this card's coming up, you need to take some time to yourself. You need to process, recover, sleep even, or just take time off. Oh, and in reverse, this card can mean like still rest, but like almost like you're stuck because you can't figure out which way to go, or almost like a mental block or art block or writer's block, that kind of thing. So then we have the 5 of Swords, and 5s as usual mean some kind of conflict or unrest. So this card specifically tends to refer to like facing a threat or being defeated or losing out, or just in general having like a big conflict that is coming up to you. And in reverse, it can suggest that you successfully won out in a conflict, but maybe you did so in a way that wasn't ethical or not on the up and up, or was otherwise not aligned with your character. It can also refer to a person who behaves that way regularly. So this card, it very much reminds me of the River Styx and Carrion, but I find what's really interesting, even though it's a very kind of almost dark and gloomy card, and you would think it might have a negative meaning, it really doesn't. It actually speaks to leaving dark waters for better days, and transformation, transition, or even recovering. So it actually has really positive meanings. It's suggesting that you're leaving the darkness and moving towards a place that's more light. But I just think it's cool that the card actually looks like it doesn't mean that at all. How did everything get so sideways? Anyway, next we have this adorable little thieving raccoon. So when this card comes up, it can have positive meanings like taking initiative or being independent. But when it comes up in this deck with this image, I almost always get this sneaky little bugger vibe. Like there's somebody in your life who is pulling the wool over your eyes and messing with you, or otherwise taking your energy, or it can even mean that maybe you're doing that to somebody and the cards want to be like, hey, what are you doing? And kind of just bring that to your attention, because we can be unaware sometimes of how we treat other people and need to be reminded, which is one of the things tarot is good at. Then we have the 8 of Swords, and here we have a blinded falcon who's in this sort of cage of floating swords around him. It speaks to that imprisonment and being blinded, but almost in a way that like you are kind of blinding yourself, you're kind of trapping yourself, or you're allowing someone else to blind you. So whatever the situation at hand is something that is within your control, but for one reason or another, you're not controlling it. You're letting it control you. In reverse, it suggests that you've started to reclaim your power and escape this situation. So next we have the 9 of Swords. This is a difficult card when it comes up because it speaks to a really difficult time in your life. It can talk about facing a lot of challenges. It can talk about struggling internally. But when this card comes out, it usually is referring to something that's really troubling you or just giving you such a hard time. And the good news about it is when this card comes up in reverse, it's suggesting that you're coming out of that period, that you're recovering, that you are reclaiming your power, that you found a solution. This is another very difficult card. It's the 10 of Swords. So most of the 10s in the tarot are good, but this one unfortunately isn't. It tends to refer to, again, like suffering, difficult times, being betrayed, being defeated. But it can also just refer to that you're feeling that way and maybe don't need to. It really depends, again, on the context. I know I keep saying that. But then in reverse, it's saying, hey, the blades are letting go, they're falling away, you're coming out of this type of difficult time. Then we have the Page of Swords, and it's this guy in the desert with this kind of a sandstorm looking thing, and he's got an adorable little fox friend. And as all pages reference new beginnings and enthusiasm, this one specifically is like really energetic. He is making good, clear decisions. He's charging out there and tackling a situation. We have the Knight of Swords, and this one, depending on what reading it comes up in, I read it a couple of different ways. It looks like it's illustrating just kind of the concept of like a berserker, somebody who runs into battle just slashing left and right, not really strategic, which is how I play video games. So Like, I'm totally a button masher. And I'm that way in other aspects of my life. So in a way, this card kind of represents me sometimes when it comes up. But it can also, and according to the book, reads as somebody who's direct, who cuts to the heart of the matter, who doesn't hesitate. They don't let emotions get the best of them. And then in reverse, it can be like impatient or impulsive energy. Next, this is one of the most beautiful cards in this entire deck. The Queen of Swords in general refers to like a very centered, wise, intelligent, yet almost a matriarch kind of vibe. But it also has this here, which I take as very visionary. So I will often read this card as visionary, but also I read this card as speaking about psychic abilities, especially clairvoyance, but just in general. And in reverse, she can say that you're letting your emotions get the best of you. Last, but certainly not least, we have the King of Swords. And this illustration has the classic like samurai armor, and he's got antlers, and he's holding his sword. And the King of Swords refers to somebody who's very authoritative, clear, intellectual, typically very fair, a good mediator, a good judge, somebody who's really good at cutting through to the heart of a situation and being really objective about it. And I find like when this card comes out, a lot of times it's representing a specific person, maybe somebody who's really ethical or something. It can also be kind of a father figure, but like maybe a more, not somebody who's actually your father, but like a person of authority who is like a father figure. So that was the Suit of Swords. And now I need to reshuffle these because I just ruined. They're all in order now and they're not supposed to be in order. But yeah, so all in all, this is a gorgeous deck with a lot of really beautiful meaning built into the way that it's illustrated. And I love all the different illustrations. I love the feel of it. It's a good size for me. I'm short and I have short hands. Like my fingers are not long. So as you can see, like this is about at the limit of what I can comfortably shuffle. And even then, like I can't shuffle it that comfortably. Case in point. But most decks are this size. This is the really kind of classic size a tarot deck tends to be. I believe the deck I designed is only slightly smaller or about the same size. I forget which. I don't know why I'm trying to talk and shuffle at the same time. I'm just making more noise. So yeah, all in all, it's a beautiful deck and beautiful illustrations with a lot of meaning packed into them. There's that card you didn't really get to see before. I like how it has kind of almost jack-o'-lantern looking guys down here. It's kind of a unique touch. It almost feels like Halloween. It's the Hierophant again. But I highly recommend picking up this deck if you feel called to it. It's reasonably priced. Like I said, the only real issue I had was with the silver on the edges, just getting every card separated. And I did notice other people mentioned that in the reviews as well, so it does seem like it's a common issue. And it's most likely not the fault of the people who designed the deck, it's more whoever manufactures it probably is just not using the best technique there. Because I have other decks that have like gilding or some kind of effect on the edge, and it wasn't stuck together like that. The cards were all perfectly separate, so something to keep in mind there. And then there's also one other thing I didn't mention. Not all the cards have it. Here's an example. So I don't know if you can see the blue edge here. So that's clearly from like another card. Actually, I think it's that exact card. Yeah, that lines up. So you can see when the sheet was printed and it went into cut that it wasn't cut perfectly. So like there are other card prints on the edges of some of them. To me, it's not a huge deal. It definitely could have had better quality than it does, but I will say, you know, for what it is, I think it's decent enough quality. It's just really the annoyance of breaking up the cards and having some of the edges be a little weird for a while. And I did also find I found like what looked like silver glitter on my hands after breaking up the edges. So it is a little messy in that sense. But all in all, it's a really beautiful deck and I highly recommend it. So, thank you so much for watching. I'm glad that you joined me today in my review of the Ostera Tarot deck. And and I hope that this was informative to you, both about this particular deck and tarot in general. I do plan on doing many more of these videos because I have a lot of decks. So, and that's both tarot and oracle decks. We'll go over both. It won't just be tarot decks. So, yeah. Thanks again for joining me. I hope you subscribe to catch more of my videos. Until next time, I love you all.